They didn't think that they'd have any trans women amongst their ranks. That's the thing.
They forgot about gay people. They fucking did this with Chelsea Manning as well. They fucking never
Exactly.
on us.
Same exact fucking thing. Exactly. She came out, she trans her gender, and now she's fucking working against them.
Transsexual fucking supremacy.
Exactly. Right. That'll be the clip I'll put just before the title. Is just you saying transsexual fucking supremacy.
Come all of you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Tell me which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Tell me which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
Welcome to another Organizing Interviews. I'm here today with Emmy Rakete from People Against Prisons Aotearoa. Emmy, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Yeah, I'm doing really good. I've learned a lot of computer stuff today to get us here, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I've guided you through it. I've been the man in the chair teaching you to hack.
I know. Are you going to send me my diploma, or what is the arrangement there?
Well, I mean, after this, you'll be able to hack anything. So you basically got the run of the place. So why don't you start by telling us about People Against Prisons Aotearoa, like what it is, what it does. Maybe a good way to frame this question would be like, what is the ultimate goal of PAPA? Yeah,
so PAPA stands for People Against Prisons Aotearoa. Aotearoa is the Māori name for the country that I live in, New Zealand.
Sounds fake to me.
Fucking cringe thing to say. So we say Aotearoa instead because we're like cool. People sometimes trip over that because Papa in English means like dad, which TERFs I think is a really good own on the organisation because they don't speak Māori. Strangely, none of them seem to speak Māori. All of them seem to have English accents actually. That's probably nothing.
Strange, yeah.
Papa in Te Reo Māori in the Māori language means something like foundation or base. And it also comes from the name Papa Tuanupū, who's the Earth Mother figure in our histories. So we're not talking about anyone's dad, or if your dad is cool, my dad's cool, then that's great. We're actually trying to tie ourselves firstly back to our most ancient ancestress, Papa Tuanupū.
And to say that you're based.
Right?
Yeah, you're based. Yeah, is what the name is.
Yeah. We are based, that we are red-pilled, that we are jerkified. No, but that we draw on a base, right? A base of support, a base of membership that we've founded in the people, which I think is an important part of how we approach organising, really. So you asked what the goal of organisation is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're a prison abolitionist organisation, which I think sounds simpler on the surface than in practice. Basically, we're a organisation who look at the criminal justice system in Aotearoa and try to see it for what it is, which is a really difficult task. One of the things that Marx does really well in Capital, small book, I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
I've read it, but I don't expect my readers to have done like obscure readings before the...
Yeah, just all of volumes 1, 2, and 3, which should be ready to roll. One of the things that Marx does really clearly in Capital, just in terms of his methodology, is he draws this distinction between the form of appearance of a thing and what a thing is. And I think it's really important to kind of draw that distinction when we're looking at doing politics, right? What does the criminal justice system look like? How does it appear to us? And what is it? What are its functions? What is it actually doing?
Yeah.
Kind of the difference between looking at the box of a PlayStation versus pulling it open and seeing the guts, right? And so approaching the criminal justice system from this Marxist perspective, seeing not just how it looks, but what it does, we try to understand it. And in this country, and in your country, and in probably every country everyone who's watching this comes from, the criminal justice system is a weapon, right? Who's in prison? Like, who's in prison? This is a pretty basic starting point for a Marxist analysis. Who's in the factories? Who's in prisons? Who's in transitional housing? Right? Who's in insane asylums? Everywhere it is poor and brown people, victims of capitalism, victims of imperialism, victims of colonialism.
Absolutely.
And so you have to be fucking delusional to say, well, the criminal justice system is just where we put the bad people.
Yeah, there's definitely
Yeah.
There's definitely an idea that well, it's in the name. There's an idea that it delivers any form of justice, whereas in fact, crime is more of a list of misdeeds that the working class have done to one another, held up as evidence that the working class couldn't govern themselves or have any sovereignty of their own without a ruling class oppressing them.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. I mean, look at
as
what
you
people
say,
in
it's a
prison
weapon.
for. Yeah, look what people in prison for, right? In this country, dishonesty offences are the largest growing category. That's lying about needing money, about needing food, about needing shelter. Driving offences, right? Not having the correct licensing and registration. You should have a driver's license because as a gay person, it's really hard to do properly. But this is used as a kind of net widening mechanism that forces more and more poor and brown people into the system where they never get out.
Right.
So Papa takes this kind of critical materialist analysis of prisons and says, if the criminal justice system is a weapon of the ruling class, a weapon of colonialism, what are we meant to do with it? Are we meant to fix it? Are we meant to improve it? And our conclusion is that you can't reform the mass grave, right? All you can do is get rid of it. So we're abolitionists, and our goal is for the dismantling of the prison system, the disarming of the police, and the creation of new ways of doing justice, grounded in communities, grounded in healing people, grounding in repairing the harm that we do to one another in a way that builds us, that builds community power, rather than in building power with bourgeoisie. And that gets over into some kind of concepts from Māori philosophy that are quite specific to here that I'll try not to get into. But one of the basic kind of principles from Māori thought is this idea of mauri. It's kind of the force that flows through us when we are living, right? And prisons cut that off, right? They cut off our aliveness in this really fundamentally wounding kind of way. And I think we can get beyond that. So that's our strategic orientation towards the removal of these blockages in the flow of mauri and towards the creation of a new kind of society.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's fab. And I think you touched on this a little bit when you talked about why Papa is called Papa and this, but like something I ask everyone, and I get the sense that you're going to have a great answer to this, is do you have organizing principles that you as an organization like work to and work around? Like I say, I get the sense that you do, and this is going to be good.
Yeah, we do. So part of this I want to go into more later because I think it's a really important lesson that we have to either learn or get killed when it comes to this question of structuring organizations. Part of how Papa is structured is we have a constitution on one hand that is the kind of the rules of how we do stuff, and then we have the kaupapa. This is a Māori word that I always forget how to translate into English, and I babble a little bit while my brain runs trying to figure out how I would translate it. So a kaupapa is like a kaupapa is like guiding foundational principles for an organization. Constitutions are important, but a kaupapa doesn't explain how you run an election or how many people are on a central committee. The kaupapa is like the point of what we're doing. Like, why are we here? I think we should ask ourselves this question, right? Like, what are you fucking doing? Why are you here? You could be like doing anything right now. NOS, do you know NOS, the nitrous? You could be huffing NOS out of a balloon right now. But you're not. You're doing this, right? You come to this meeting.
They should be watching this video right now. Don't tell my viewers they could be going.
You should be unfucking subscribing. You know, watch Mario 64 speedrunners right now. You're on the right website for it, so you could. A kaupapa is the answer to this question, right? Why the fuck are we here? Why do we give a shit about what we're doing right now? And so Papa's kaupapa is made of these kind of 7 points, and I won't go over all of them because yours will be different for you, right? Firstly, anti-capitalism, right? And I've already been like pretty unambiguous about that one. Community, decolonization, these are all the point of what we're doing. And if you want to be part of Papa, then you need to agree with this kaupapa, or else we're doing different projects, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine. Yeah. There are all kinds of projects that I'm not going to, say sign up to these ones, or you should just go and watch Super Mario 64 speedruns. But you need to have something that you believe in, right? And so the kaupapa is really the kind of the constitution's constitution, right? It's the point of it's the point of everything that we're doing.
Yeah. That makes sense.
We keep it deliberately not loose and not wishy-washy or ungrounded, but deliberately general enough that if you show up and you're interested in the work, but you don't agree that dong Xiaoping's economic reforms were an important part of building socialism, you're not going to be like thrown out, which I think is something that leftists aren't good at doing.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you will get someone trying to argue with me on that point in your comments after this. The point is that we have strategic unity, right? That we agree on enough things that we can have a meaningful project. And there's things that we disagree on that will sink a project, right? But there's things that we don't have to agree on and still do meaningful work together that's going to advance the cause of annihilating the bourgeoisie.
Absolutely. I mean, I was saying this just the other day, like, one of our biggest issues with organizing in the left is that we're trying to form coalitions of consciousness. Like, we have ideas and principles, and we're trying to find people we agree with on those things and work together towards a common goal with them. Whereas one of the reasons why you can see that, like, reaction has allowed people to organize way more rapidly in recent years, I think, is because they're forming these unconscious coalitions, and the point is the things that they're ignoring and not thinking about. So if you think, for example, here in the UK, the gender critical feminists are like, you know, a lot of them say about, like, I will uncomfortably work with the Tories, the Nazis, the fascists, the people who want to kick in gay people's heads. I'll uncomfortably work with them because I care so much about destroying trans people. And it's like, what they have in common is the stuff they're just not thinking about, not being curious about, refusing to think about. And I think we have the opposite problem, where we're trying to work out this the tiny minutiae of everything before we get going. And to some degree, we just need to, like, be like, okay, maybe we disagree on these things, but like fucking, you know, there are people in prison right now. We need to deal with that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. I think this is great. I'm paraphrasing. Antonio Gramsci argues that common sense is the ideology of the ruling class. That the ideas that tend to predominate are the ideas of the bourgeoisie. And so if you just take common sense, right? Oh, it's just common sense that there are like two sexes, for one example. That idea didn't come from nowhere. It came from the fucking bourgeois injunction to have a reproductive family unit in which women can perform household labor and men can go and do, you know, waged factory work. So this idea isn't just like an immutable truth of the universe. It's bourgeois economics given ideological form. And we should criticize that. But maybe we could argue with each other like 10% less and get a little bit more work done as well.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. And I think, so speaking of common sense as something that is very much on the side of the bourgeoisie, like something I was going to say before was like drug offenses would be a good example of a place where people are kind of familiar with like a lot of the injustice in people being locked up for drug offenses. And a lot of people will try to argue that on it being common sense because of like the dangers of drugs. And then you try to talk about the different like criminalizations of different kinds of drugs. I've done this stream with ThoughtSlime about psychedelics and legalization and different drugs and how they're criminalized, and a lot of it has to do with obviously just the history of like productivity cultures and capitalism. For example, slaves in America were given cocaine, and then a lot of freed slaves who had cocaine addictions from working on plantations and being given cocaine to make them more productive were then prosecuted for using cocaine. And it's like, the thing that gets missed in common sense discussions about drugs, I think, a lot of the time, is that the law is something that's written down, and when people think that there's a common sense distinction to do with like some drugs being illegal or something, to do with some drugs being more dangerous, but who actually goes to jail isn't just what's written down. Who actually goes to jail is to do with policing and where they're policing and what the police are doing. So I was saying, I'm in South London right now. If some people are, especially if they're black people, a little south of here in like poorer neighborhoods, are having a party and they're doing cocaine, the police are way more likely to be policing there to knock down the door and send someone to jail for a really long time. If there's someone who is having another party just a couple of miles away in Canary Wharf in the financial sector, there's no chance in hell they're ever going to get arrested for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point though, right? That we it has to do with this form of appearance idea, right? That law takes the form of appearance as a way of dealing with harm.
Yeah.
Drugs are a really good example of this, that criminalization of drugs is a way of reducing drug harm. But your life is far more ruined by being sent to fucking prison than even really, really serious drug addiction. So if the cure is incredibly, orders of magnitude more damaging than the problem, who is actually being protected? And the answer is always interests of the ruling class, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. If there are viewers watching in Aotearoa and they are interested in Papa and getting involved with the literal organization Papa that you're involved with, how could they do that? What are contact details? What's the process if someone's watching and they're like incredibly based, I have to dedicate my life to this today? What are they going to do?
Yeah, so the first thing you're going to do is go to Libya, where Muammar Gaddafi will give you a full suite of guerrilla training. So obviously, we're living in, I think unprecedented times is the euphemism that we usually use. There's a fucking global pandemic. So the form that organising takes is always being changed because it keeps being made a crime to go outside. At the moment, most of our organising is taking place online because most of the country is experiencing varying levels of lockdown restrictions. At the moment, live in Auckland. Auckland's the biggest city in New Zealand, and so it's our largest branch. And we've been meeting online for the last infinity, I think is how long we've been locked down for. We're meeting online for the last infinity because there's no safe way to meet in person. That will probably change though once we come out of lockdown. But at the moment, we're doing our meetings through Zoom. We're a structured organisation. We have like a membership structure. If you're interested in Papa, become a member. Our website is papa.org.nz. We have a membership sign-up process, which is really easy, and that will get you a membership and a link to our Discord, which is our digital organising platform. For people who are young and fun, you probably already know what Discord is. I didn't know what Discord was, so I've been learning about that. But we use Discord to coordinate the different working groups in the organisation to help make sure that the work is still going on, even if we can't physically go and catch up.
Nice.
But we've really tried during the lockdown to digitize our in-person organising rather than becoming a chat room for people who don't like the police. Because I think it's really easy to just post.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone has ever successfully posted a government out of existence, so we're going to have to do other stuff. So we have kind of the different organs of the organisation that are still all functioning and still doing the work that they were doing before the lockdown. We're just doing it online.
It's not that I'm the one making this argument, but one could make an argument that Lenin posted the Tsar out of existence. One could make that argument.
If you're as good at posting as fucking Vladimir Lenin was, then you go and do it. But I will believe it when I fucking see it. Lenin was like the Kwisatz Haderach of posting. This motherfucker coming back from Finland. He knew that he was banned from being in Russia, and he was on a fucking tram to go to one of the Haberdashers Union protests for International Women's Day. He knew that he would be fucking arrested and possibly killed if he was seen, and he still got into an argument with the tram conductor while there were Tsarist police on the tram because he thought that she had said something which was like un-Marxist. So if you're on that level, then I encourage you to like please destroy the American government with posts.
Absolutely. Lenin definitely got really high in a tent with his mum and had a vision, and that's when he knew he was going to overthrow the bourgeoisie. Fucking hell. Right. If a viewer is in my country or let's say America or one of, the European ones that all sound fake, and they want to do something like what you're doing, but it doesn't exist where they are and they don't see any organizations around, what could they do to like get something going? What's your advice for that?
Yeah. So, first of all, you shouldn't be in those countries. That's cringe. But second of all, if you can't help it, and I understand there's a pandemic, it's very hard to just go. So if you are in one of the bad places, that I forgive you. Yeah, I think you already made the most important point, right? Which is that if we can avoid it, we shouldn't replicate efforts. So if you fucking hate prisons, right, and there's already a prison abolitionist organization, you should probably just join it.
Right.
I think that one of the problems that we're facing as a left is that The CIA really beat the shit out of us during the Cold War, and we don't have lasting institutions, right? The Comintern is gone. A lot of these kinds of, even national, let alone international structures, a lot of our national leftist structures are gone or co-opted or shit, right? I mean, even the union movement in the United States, the AFL-CIA, which was training fucking, coup makers to put America's tentacles into the global South, ruined, South America for decades. So we have a real problem that we don't have these lasting institutions. And if we start new organizations every 5 years and don't build off of the ones that already exist and are already doing the work, we're never going to build these institutions. So if you can join something that exists and it's not dog shit, you should think about joining it.
Yeah.
But if you don't have anything on the particular kind of area of struggle, then I think you should. Yeah, let me so I'll do story time for a second as to for how we got started, because when we really got doing our work, there were no formally prison abolitionist organizations, and there was certainly none with a revolutionary Marxist orientation. Although there are people who aren't Marxist in Papa, I should be clear about that. But there were no prison abolitionist organizations with a revolutionary orientation. And so we got our start out of a reading group that I was part of at the university that I still go to, even though I'm nearly 30. Oof. So we started as a reading group. Part of what we did was reading prison abolitionist stuff. We were mostly a queer theory group, but part of what we read was kind of queer perspectives on mass incarceration. So there were already a group of us who were already kind of radicalized and politically conscious. And then in 2015, the Auckland Pride Parade announced that cops and prison guards were going to be marching in the Pride Parade, which is not a unique problem. I think this happens in a lot of places around the world. But we decided that we didn't want that. And so we decided that we were going to blockade the Pride Parade. So we, on very, very short notice, pulled together a group of people. And then some of the people decided they couldn't do it, which is fine. So it ended up being 3 of us and a big banner that said "No Pride in Prisons." And we went to the parade route, got all set up, saw the fucking police marching band coming, bagpipers. Why do cops love bagpipes, incidentally? That is something for the people of Scotland.
It's just a very white
thing.
Bagpipers. It's just a symbol of white people.
Why people don't have culture, so they use bagpipes instead?
It's a musical instrument that sounds like several people moaning at the same time, and that's white culture.
So anyway, the police marching band was coming, the uniformed prison guards. They had the police commissioner, the highest police bureaucrat, on a fucking horse, and our fucking Pride Parade coming up, and we jumped out the banister, out there with the banner saying "No Pride in Prisons," because fuck them, right? Fuck them. I think that's a perfectly good starting point for analysis. And we got the shit beaten out of us. I think I'm probably the only person I know who's been beaten by the police bagpipe band. But the kind of the terminus of that first action was that in the course of getting thrown out of the parade route, I had my arm shattered and spent quite a while in hospital in physical therapy getting it fixed, which sucks. But it provided us this massive, national level media platform to explain why we did what we did and why it's fucked for racist fucking cops and prison guards to march on a Pride Parade when trans women were still at that time being placed in men's prisons with, complete routinity. So we used that as the launching point for an organization. In the beginning, really it was a Facebook Messenger group with a few of us who were already friends, who were coordinating different stuff that we wanted to do. Working with some people inside who had gone in touch with us, doing protests, doing media releases, and kind of learning all of this stuff with a little bit of help from pre-existing organizations in the radical left-wing space, to kind of begin criticizing the criminal justice system from an abolitionist perspective. And over time, what became really apparent to us was that this unstructured organizational form was no longer sufficient for the task that we were trying to use it for. For the reading group, it was fine. For an organization whose goal is to abolish prisons, having no structure actually was literally not going to work. We were literally not going to achieve that goal if we didn't have structures in place that would help us know what we were doing. We created a formal kaupapa for people to sign up with. We created a constitutional structure. We formalized what the kind of organizational chart of the organization was going to look like. So there are local branches, there's a national organizing committee, there are different working groups within the organization that operate nationally who have elected coordinators that sit on a national organizing committee. We put all this stuff in place so that we could formalize how it is that we were going to set about doing our work. And that helped us end this kind of ad hocracy, right? Well, this idea that comes from Joe Freeman's, this great survey, Joe Freeman, about the feminist movement called The Tyranny of Structurelessness. And that's the idea that when there's no structure, there is structure, but it's an unacknowledged structure. Because human beings are different. We have different capacities, right?
Yeah.
I, for instance, am very funny, and I'm good at thinking on my feet, and I can do these interviews, and I can hopefully conduct myself well and persuasively. And so I ended up doing a lot of the media work for People Against Prisons Aotearoa.
Yeah.
But no one agreed that I could do that early on. No one said, oh, Emmy should be our spokesperson. So I could do whatever I fucking wanted. So I could be like, we are a Juche organization. And no one could say, hang on, I don't remember saying that we were a Juche organization, Emmy. And so there's kind of this informal operation of power that creating formal organizational structures helps us to head off, because it makes us accountable, right? It makes us accountable to each other. And it makes us accountable to our base, to our class. If we just did whatever, then there's no necessary reason that we're connected to anybody, right? We could forever just be heads kind of floating around in the void saying very, very good slogans, excellent slogans. But if those slogans have no bearing, no relationship whatsoever to the sentiments of the proletariat, there's no point.
Yes.
Right? We might as well just sit on Twitter fighting out really excellent opinions. But by creating this structure, creating a membership base with like members and going to our class, listening to them and hearing what their concerns are and repeating those concerns back to them through the lens of revolutionary theory, we're able to not just represent ourselves. I'm not representing me. I'm here representing my organization. My organization represents the interests of the working class. And that is what I think takes us from being really, really good posters to being representatives of the revolutionary subject. And I think if we don't make this move, we're all going to be killed eventually.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, and thank you for sharing like what happened with Papa specifically. And I think to boil down what you said, you're kind of saying that like you got people who you really trusted and you knew that you agreed politically, and then you took your sort of step 2 was this conscious formalization of the structure, because if you don't do that, you're going to have a structure anyway, which, that's just definitely always true. I mean, there have definitely been a few projects in the online left where I and some other creators have tried, for example, to make like a YouTubers union or other like projects to try and do things, and without any formalized structure in place, it's a very like Black Mirror kind of hierarchy of like the bigger accounts, the people with more subs are literally just like in charge. It's such a good point. Like that's exactly what happens. Like there definitely is a form if you don't make one.
Yeah, I think this question of what is the structure that we should use for our work, this is the lesson that I've learned from organizing. I think this is probably the most important thing that I've learned. And like I don't think even that, I don't take any ideological stances. I've got no biases or preconceptions about how we should do things. There's lots of completely legitimate ways that we can go about doing our politics. I'm not going to tell anyone that there's a right way and a wrong way that you should do things. Structurelessness works fine for some problems, right? There are some problems that you don't need a formal structure to solve. Building political consciousness is probably, I don't think there needs to be like a commissar of the reading group. You should have a reading group, by the way. It's a really important way that we can build our understanding of what the fuck we're trying to do here. And not structuring those usually works fine. Our reading group had very little structure and went really, really, really well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you're doing things that don't need structure, for God's sake, don't try to structure them too intensely, or you're going to drive everyone insane. Or we're going to vote on the first time to turn the page. I wouldn't show up to that anymore. But there are some tasks that we just can't achieve if we don't have an idea of what we're doing that is grounded in a shared understanding. And if we aren't being upfront about how we're building that understanding, it's going to be the best speakers, right? People who are in the group who are really funny and persuasive, they will end up making all of the decisions. I know because I'm a pretty good speaker, and I ended up dictating a lot of decisions early on in the organization that probably weren't democratically made and may not have had a democratic mandate. It's going to be people who have the most time, right? Who have the most ability to show up that will end up making most of the decisions, because other people do want to go home and watch Super Mario 64 speedruns. They don't want to be in a meeting every single day.
Yeah.
And those people probably have ideas that are just as good as everyone else's.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
we don't have a decision-making structure in which, decision makers are accountable to the membership, then those people's ideas end up being excluded. And I just think that the idea that no structure is the best structure, I think it betrays a real lack of faith in each other, right? That you can't make an idea, you can't make a decision that affects me without oppressing me somehow. That I can't entrust myself to you. And I think that we can entrust ourselves to each other. And
you absolutely have to have trust in your comrades.
Yeah. And so that was the real gift, I think, that creating structure really gave to me. And it will help you get stuff done. If someone is in charge of going, this is what we're going to do, and if you think I'm abusing my power, then remove me from this position. It means that we don't have to have a meeting on every call that gets made. We don't have to have input on every decision that we make. We can trust each other. So to me, creating these structures when you need them is the best way to get something off of the ground.
I think that when people are trying to formalize a structure for a group and make some kind of organizing decisions, sometimes where the responsibilities lie can get tied up not just in questions of capacity and your abilities, but also sometimes in questions of ego, especially among us who are like more egalitarian minded, and the whole point of what we're doing is trying to make it so everyone is equal. The questions of people who is in charge becomes like a contentious issue, and the allegory I kind of used to think about it a little is for my D&D heads, right? Like if you're playing a game of D&D, like the person DMing, for those who aren't familiar, like the person who voices all of the other characters and makes the monsters and sort of the players fight against them, like they're not actually in charge. You're all telling a story together. And like if you used a game of D&D to plan out how you were going to make a trip to a water park and have fun with your friends, then like the person DMing that wouldn't be in charge of the trip to the water park. They would just be the one who looked up the plans, how to get there, what resources you need, the layout of the water park, how to get to all the best rides the fastest.
Where the guards of the water park are.
Where the staff work and what their jobs are and when they change shift and things like this. And that would be a different kind. That would be like a different kind of responsibility to the responsibility that the members of your player party take on. They're just different kinds of responsibilities, and it doesn't necessarily actually mean that someone's in charge. I think that capitalist and hierarchical society have given us this deep rooted mindset that the people who wield the most responsibility or have the appearance of wielding the most responsibility are the ones who are superior. And actually different responsibilities, well, from each according to their ability is what you could say. That's just an idea I came up with just now myself. Sophie, if you want to attribute that quote, that's from each according to their ability, Sophie. So yeah, so I know that my viewers are like quite concerned about safety and also about accessibility. So I have kind of a two-part question here. So the first is, what does Papa do to make sure that people are feel safe and included? I have like examples that I fall back on in this two-part question, and like they, funnily enough, right? So for example, if there are trans people or people from ethnic minority backgrounds, where I usually go with that. And then the second part of the question is, what does your organization do for people who are, maybe have their time limited? For example, people with kids. And actually, so I know I'm talking to you, and you're just like all my example questions, basically. But what does Papa do to make sure people feel safe and included? And sort of part two to that question, what about people who don't necessarily have as much time because maybe they work a job, they have kids, or they're just their accessibility needs are different, like they have a serious disability?
Yeah, I think these are really important questions, right? And I think this contemporary debate about patriotic socialism, this is really relevant to that, because how do you do like American nationalist socialism in a way that doesn't kind of belittle the particular struggles? And the answer is that of course you can't. America is the great Satan, right? So, how do we deal with the fact that we're not all the same?
The creation of America, the creation of America, like, is deeply tied historically to the modern conception of race, like inseparably, like
fucking inseparable, right? This is an important question, because if we can't answer this well, it's not a moral problem, I don't think, right? I don't think that the problem with not doing anti-racism in our organizing spaces, I don't think the problem with that is that we're immoral for not being anti-racist. I think the problem with that is that we're failing if we don't do anti-racism, because race is intrinsically tied, I feel quite happy asserting this, to every single fucking thing any of us give a shit about. Try to do socialism in a way that's not anti-racist. It's fucking, it's you have to be a moron, right? You have to be a complete moron to try to do that, because capitalism today relies on racism. Obviously, who is dying young in factories? Is it fucking middle-aged white guys? Probably not. Probably it's brown women and children in the third world. So if we want to do socialism, we have to answer this question of not just the universal struggle of the proletariat, of course the universal struggle of the proletariat, but the particular sectional problems of the different parts of the proletariat, right? Mao Zedong says that everything has got contradictions internal to it. It's a very basic idea to Marxist reason. Everything contradicts itself internally. And that doesn't mean that everything is fucked. It means that everything has got moving parts. And the proletariat has got moving parts, right? There are women and brown people. And some of those women and brown people are incredibly funny and sexy, and they've got big brains and fat asses. So we need to look at this question in organizing spaces. And Papa has always been doing this. I think we have an advantage in the sense as a prison abolitionist organization, because you would need to be huffing nitrous out of a balloon to try to do criminal justice issues without looking at racism. You would need to be doing with it. Because the criminal justice system is the most apparently white supremacist tool of the capitalist class. In all of the imperialist countries, right? In New Zealand, Māori are 15% of the general population and 51% of the prison population. I know that in the UK, the situation is similar. In Canada, obviously the same. Australia, one of the most shameful places in the world, with the routine killing of Indigenous Australian people. And I won't even say the name of that other colonial imperial country. It starts with an A, because it sickens me. But we all know what criminal justice looks like in the core of the empire. It looks like the executions of brown people in the street. So, what do we do about that in our organizing spaces? First of all, we talk about this explicitly, right? We incorporate an analysis of racism into our basic understanding of the thing that we're trying to solve. That's easier for abolitionists than it might be for socialists, and that's because socialism has historically, in the imperial core, really struggled to answer this question. I think that's part of why it has been so weak in recent decades, right? But by incorporating an understanding of racism or of other kinds of sectional violence into our analysis, it kind of makes it impossible not to say, well, what are we doing to work with the communities who are most affected by this? You know, one of the things that you will learn if you go into organizing is that, and this isn't a joke or an insult or attack, most of the people who are there are white, relatively middle class insofar as that concept holds any water, university students. I see this, those are the many people who I was organizing with for many years. I'm sure that this is the case everywhere. That's not a bad thing. This is a segment of the population who've been radicalized and really successfully, and I think it's really important that they have been.
Yeah.
Because
this is something we touched on in a different this is something we touched on in a different organizing interview, is that like just the people who have the time, who are there and who have the free time, often that comes out of privilege, it comes out of certain societal privileges. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And it's great. It's great. It's good. It's important. We rely on those people to get work done, but those people can't be the base of our work.
Yes.
Because their material interests aren't the most important in prison abolition. It's primarily not middle-class white kids who go to university who are being kind of victimized by the cops and being sent to prison. Many are, but the base of the movement for us is the urban proletariat, primarily the brown urban proletariat, primarily the Māori proletariat. And so one of the solutions that we have to this on a structural organizational level is the institution of the Māori caucus and their organization. This goes back to the founding legal arrangement between the British Empire and the kind of early Māori state, which basically agreed to autonomy between the two. Māori retained our Tino Ranga Whirutanga, our absolute sovereignty, and the British Empire agreed to regulate the conduct of its own citizens. And so we took this constitutional arrangement and used it as the basis for the organisation. So Māori have our own representative on the Central Committee who can veto decisions if they're racist or if they're shit or if they aren't representing the interests of Māori people. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to be doing good organising work. The Māori caucus kind of does its own activities, has its own discussion groups, its own channel of Discord. We kind of work and we've never needed to use this, but we work as an emergency brake on the organisation if it's needed, to say the work that we're doing now is not representing the interests of Māori, and we need to stop or we're going to sink the capacity of the organisation to serve the people. We've never needed to do that, which I'm quite proud of. So on one level, it's analysis. We need to understand how sectional oppression is part of our task. Part of it is structural, right? Making sure that the way our organizations work on a day-to-day level requires us to incorporate this analysis into the work that we do, so that we can't all decide to be patriotic socialists. Thirdly, I think it's building a base amongst the people who we are seeking to represent. And this is something that we've, as the left, speaking very broadly, we haven't done this in a long time, right? And I see really encouraging signs of this, even from the Democratic Socialists of America, a very, very mixed organization, which I have a lot of criticism of. But they've built this culture of canvassing, which I think is a really important skill set, which we should all be building. Going to the people who are the most affected by the threat about, and telling them about it, and building their political consciousness, and radicalizing them, and drawing them into the struggle. Makes us have to account for them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We couldn't be an organization of patriotic socialists going out to Māori communities and saying, did you know that there's no difference between brown people and white people? Because we'd be laughed off of every doorstep.
Right, absolutely. And rightfully so, yeah.
Yeah, these three things, I think, force us not to be chauvinists. It's very, very easy to become chauvinists.
Yeah, I think it's it's something you're absolutely right. Like the class reductionist kind of wing of like hyper online fucking leftists. This patriotic American socialism thing is so ridiculous. The biggest U.S. prison is the Louisiana State Penitentiary, which is nicknamed the Angola Plantation because, of how very literally U.S. prisons evolved out of chattel slavery. Like, just freed slaves were just captured again by cops and sent to prison and used as prison labor. In America, the provision that in the Constitution that ends slavery says except for prisons. And this concept of race, like in the modern sense, exists in order to outsource labor, to export labor. And so within the imperial core, like prisons are a racialized labor force, and then the rest of the labor is exported to other countries, to the global south. As you say, like, who is dying in factories today? It's brown people in it's black and brown people, it's these women and kids dying in factories, and it's not some like white dude in the US, UK, Canada, Australia, whatever. Like, to ignore the concept, to ignore how race interlinks with this stuff would be directly counter to the mission itself. You're so right.
Yeah, just I think this idea of class reductionism is really interesting, right? Because people who are engaging in class reductionism, they're just the people who would prefer not to account for the ways that different parts of the proletariat are marginalized in different ways. I mean, they're not even like, I don't think that we should call them class reductionists, because their understanding of class is like a fucking child's. Because how are you going to understand the exploitation of labor and you're not interested in these enormous populations of dispossessed, destitute people who are brown, who are black? I mean, they literally, if you try to ignore the way that different racialized populations are exploited in capitalism, you don't understand capitalism anymore. It's like a backwards projection of this all-white utopia onto capitalism, and then trying to pretend that if we all put on overalls and hit a steel beam with a hammer, everything's going to be fine. So long as you ignore everything outside your walled fucking garden. It's just, I'm not even angry about it because I'm brown and I would like socialism one day. I'm mad about it because I'm a Marxist who's read Marx, and I think that you literally aren't doing Marxism anymore if you can't look at this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you're absurdly spot on. Yeah.
So this question of how we account for different people's capacities in organizing is a really important part of how you make an organization function. Because like I was saying, that a large part of our kind of demographic in organizing spaces is university students who've got heaps of free time. Thank God they've got heaps of free time, because there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done. But you can't use the amount of free time that a university student has got as kind of the benchmark for buy-in as a member of the organization, or else anyone who's got a kid is not showing up. Anyone who's got an actual demanding job is not showing up, and you end up losing connection to the people who you're meant to be representing.
Absolutely.
Even me being here now, this is the first media thing that I've done for Papa since August, because my partner and I just had a baby. I'm in her room right now. She's fine. And so you need to account for this, or else you're going to kind of systematically warp your organization's understanding of the situation. This is made even worse if you don't have formal structures in place to have accountable decision making. If every person responsible for a task in your organization is a university student, they will have a university student's worldview on how to set about doing stuff, on how much time people have got to do stuff, and on what the best decisions to make are. And in all of those areas, they're representing a particular kind of person, not a universal subject that we're all part of. So you need to account for this, or else you'll end up thinking that everyone has got 30 hours a week to do organizing work, and if they don't, they're not very committed. I've done zero organizing work for about 2 months, and I think I'm a pretty committed person. So we account for this, again, structurally, right? And culturally to an extent, but culture flows on from structure, I think. I don't think we should try to just demand cultural change. I think we should implement structural change and then encourage cultural change to flow on from there. So we account for this problem structurally through a working group system. I think I talked about this before. We have a local branches which do local level work, organizing, mailing letters to prisons, for instance. There's something that our Wellington branch does, and they do it very well. Canvassing in different neighborhoods. Local branches do this kind of stuff. Organizing protests is usually done by local branches. But we also have working groups. So I'm head of the press working group. We write the press releases together, contact journalists, contact YouTubers, do all of this kind of formal media work. We have a social media working group who do our social media posts, who create art, solicit artists to create work that we then share on our social media platforms. We have a campaigns working group who organise what the strategy is going to be. We recently won a fight against UK-style armed response teams. These would be squad cars of cops armed with machine guns on patrol in brown neighbourhoods looking for brown people to shoot to death. We managed to defeat that trial program because of the campaigns working group. And by having these working groups, having someone who's in charge of different areas of the organisation, we make it quite easy for people to buy into the extent that they're able to. So I have some people in my working group, the press working group, who will show up once a year maybe and help. So I have a friend who's a PR person, like an actual trained public relations person. Probably she does fewer Stalin jokes when she's doing PR than I do in my role, but that's fine. And she'll show up once a year.
People's styles differ. Yeah, it's fine.
She'll say, "Hi, Amy, how's it going? Here is a list of journalists," and it's the journalists, it's all of them. And so I use that to send press releases and get a good spread. And other people are in there all the time, right? Our social media coordinator, I've got to give him a shout out, Henry Laws, the OG, is online basically 24/7, keeping an eye out for news stories that are relevant to us and sharing those to our social media, different social media platforms, sharing our analysis of those things. By having kind of a formal structure, by separating responsibilities for different parts of the organization and saying, here is what you can do. Some of the tasks are big, some of the tasks are small. It means that people can do meaningful work to the extent that they're able to. And I think that kind of, it really lets people with a lot of time, like university students, for example, really be the kind of grunt work backbone of getting very, very labor-intensive projects done. And people who've got specialized knowledge, who've got specialized understandings of subjects or particular skills, sometimes the people who have less time, but they can be like this tip of the spear in getting tasks done that we couldn't do if we were relying on a kind of general member who doesn't necessarily have those skills. By having the structure in place, it creates a flow on in the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
Before we had this kind of, before we were careful about this, we did slip for a while into this kind of, presumption that everyone would be able to work like a university student who has, it's hard, but it's not that hard. And we slipped into the assumption that everyone could work this way. And it drove away everyone who couldn't work that way. And that meant that we ended up being an organization of university students who are great, but are not the base of our organization. And so by restructuring, first of all, by taking a really serious, objective look at ourselves and looking kind of past the form of appearance to see what was going on in the organization, how was it functioning incorrectly, we could diagnose the problem, create a structural response to that problem, and then allow for a cultural change to flow on from that. And we don't have this problem anymore.
Nice. That's really cool. I guess I just have the one last question, and that's that I like to ask everybody this. If someone, our hypothetical viewer, hopefully not hypothetical, our viewer, okay, our many viewers who are watching and they've become incredibly committed. They're like, this is it, I'm going to do this. Some of them are in Aotearoa and they're going to go join Papa. Some of them are in other countries and they're going to start their own thing. But what common issues and pitfalls are they going to run into when they do that? In other words, what mistakes should this person watch out for?
Yeah, man, this is a big question, right? I will try to be concise. I think it's very easy to fall into tactics without strategy. I'm kind of getting back to Sun Tzu here, Art of War, which you should read. It's very easy to fall into tactics, but no strategy. As the left, we've been doing tactics with no strategy for about 40 years. It's very easy to fall into this kind of trap of, well, we've got to do something, so we'll do something. Well, we did something, now what? Well, we've got to do something. The problem with that is that I think we have a pretty good idea of what the problem is. I think most of us aren't clueless, right? We wake up, we look outside, well, it's awful. That's the bourgeoisie's fault. And that's a good analysis. Prisons are awful because of the bourgeoisie. Great. What are we going to do? Well, we'll have a protest. That's not a shit idea. We've had a protest. How do we get from having done a protest to fixing the problem of the bourgeoisie, running a criminal justice system in order to reinforce their material interests? And there's not a necessarily line from doing a protest to overthrowing the bourgeoisie. So we really need to think carefully about how the things we do fit into an overall strategy. For us, this has meant building a base in the communities that are most affected by mass incarceration. So for a while, we were mostly a protest organization, right? We'd show up We'd have some really, really good banners, some placards. We get heaps of people to come, heaps of, lots of friends would come from other left-wing organisations. We had lots of members coming to stuff, and we'd go to a Department of Corrections office and have a big protest because they were fucking racist. And I stand by that because we were right. They fucking were racist. But having done that protest didn't do much really to advance our strategic goal of abolishing prisons and ending capitalism in this country. The shifts came with this structural organizational thinking that let us kind of figure out what are we going to do in the long term in order to advance our interests. So an early stage of this was we wrote a book. I don't think you need to write a book as motivation. We wrote a book called Abolitionist Demands, which was looking at cops, courts, and corrections in the short, medium, and long term, and seeing what changes will need to be made in order for us to be happy with the world we live in. And we did that. It's available on our website if you want to read it, and it just says what needs to change. Then we kind of had to go, well, fucking, how does showing up with a banner get any of these things done? And
absolutely.
What I do think protests are important for, though, is advertising. Protests are advertising for the most part.
Absolutely.
That's fine. You should advertise your organization. So do a protest, do a big ad, do a really flashy ad, do something that's witty and confronting and pisses off the right people and doesn't piss off the wrong people and energizes people. And you'll do a really fucking good ad. When we did our protest at Pride, it pissed off a lot of the right people and it energized a lot of the right people. And we had a lot of people come to us then. But you can't just do ads, right? Protests are just physical posts. You've got to do campaigns. And campaigns are way harder than protests. I could do a protest right now. I could head out, tell my building manager, he hasn't fixed the fucking fan in our bathroom. I could do a protest right now. But if I wanted to actually get everyone's fans fixed, I would need to organize the people in this building to say, hey, Wayne, come fix the fucking fans. And it's that step from doing protests to organizing community power that a lot of people never make. A lot of organizations never move from one to the other. And it means that they never get the leverage necessary to achieve their goals. So I talked before about the armed response team trial. Where the police just announced one day that they were going to do armed cars full of cops roaming around literally the two brownest parts of the country, Christchurch. We recently had a fascist terrorist attack. And the reasoning was that because there was a fascist terrorist attack, we need these armed response teams. But the armed response teams were in brown communities, so I don't really buy that. So it would be
to step up immigration to stop white Australians coming in because they're clearly they're not sending their best.
Yeah, I considered that. I think there's definitely good ideas in there. It would have been easier, I think, in a different period for us to just do a protest about this thing that the cops wanted to do. And the things that we said at that protest would have been, I'm sure, 100% accurate, right? That this is a racist strategy, that this will not reduce gun violence, that this is an existing agenda in the police union, that it's going to worsen all the problems in our society and not solve any of the issues. All completely true. But it wouldn't have achieved anything. It wouldn't have actually stopped them. The way we stopped them was by canvassing on a big level in different communities who are the most affected, literally in the communities where these armed response teams are going to be. We held a town hall and invited people in these communities to come tell us what they felt about armed response teams. And we took what they told us and then interpreted it through our analysis of the criminal justice system and then explained those ideas back to them. This idea comes from Mao Zedong. It's the idea of the mass line, if you want to read more about it. You take the ideas that exist in our class, you interpret them through our revolutionary understanding of society, and then you give those ideas back to our class and say, this is why you're mad, right? So for one example, a woman came to our town hall and said, the cops came to my house and they bashed my door in, and the person who they're looking for wasn't there, had never been there. And I was so afraid of them. And we kind of took this and said, this isn't random. This wasn't arbitrary. This wasn't, a cosmic fucking coincidence that the cops came to your door as a brown woman living in a working class community, smashed it in and terrorized you. This is a response of decades of racist policing, which must be undone through state policy if we're ever going to solve it. And by formulating that back, that person understood why they were in the situation they were, right? They gained a revolutionary understanding of the world in which they live. And that helped us to mobilize people. We got thousands and thousands of people to write to cops, to the police commissioner, to the Minister of Police, to the local MPs, to MPs who we knew were already on our side, and we got ministers of parliament, and we got heaps of people to join in this radical revolutionary critique of armed response teams. And we swamped them with negative feedback. They just drowned them in it. And for months, I think it was a 3-month long trial, for the entire period, not a single positive story. There was one positive news story that came out on day one that had a bunch of B-roll of cops looking like fucking Rambo, like strapped up. Not like strapped up in a lesbian way, like strapped up in like a racist.
Not in the cool,
way.
fun way. No, yeah.
No,
would be.
in like the
Never would be.
racist way. But they were like strapped up all this tactical gear. They would buy like cop cars in like a parking garage with the sirens going and like flashing lights, and they looked so fucking cool. One positive story used that B-roll, and then for 3 months there were stories about how terrified everyone was of being murdered in the street by a police officer. On top of that B-roll of the cops looking like fascist killers. And it made it completely impossible for the police to move forward with this policy, and they had to can it after the 3-month-long trial. This is the kind of work that you can only do if you go to the communities that are affected, listen to them, explain to them why they feel the way that they do, and then tell them what to do, right? We made a website that listed everyone who you should contact and told people, here are the talking points that you feel, right? This is why you hate this. Here is how you explain it. Here's how you articulate yourself. And they did by the thousands. And we swamped them and we won.
Fuck yeah. Incredible. Okay, I guess before we wrap up, just free soapbox. Anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to say? Any other organizations you want to point people towards? Or, yeah, fuck it. Like I said, just anything you want to say to my viewers before you go.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I think that the really important starting point for this is study, which is lame. But we need to study, and there's many ways you can study. This is study, but we've been working on these problems for generations, right? Generations before us were looking at this and going, what the fuck is wrong? And I think they came to some pretty good conclusions about it. But if we don't learn from them, they're just corpses, right? They don't need to be. They can live and walk among us now. The poster that I was holding up before said, Lenin lived, Lenin lives, Lenin shall live forever. That's only true if we look at what Lenin had to say and evaluate him in the current historical context. Otherwise, he's as dead as that thing in St. Petersburg. But if we look at what Lenin had to say, if we look at his understanding of the situation that he was in and say, does this still hold true? And apply the lessons that come from that to our world now, then he walks among us and he's still guiding us. And I think that he does that and he can do that. So go to the old masters and see what they were right about. See what they were wrong about. And use that when you get out there and really get some work done.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much, Emmy. Everyone check out Papa. And if you're not in Aotearoa, find a way to fuck up prisons and cops where you are instead. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everyone.
Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair.